a place where monarchs roamed, in a majestic facility where we are fueling dreams of young people to play our pastime and to become great citizens through learning through this amazing game called baseball. I'm Bob Kendrick. I am president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. It is so good to be with you, and as I look out over this audience to see all of these amazing folks who represent diverse parts of our great community, a place that we're all proud of, Kansas City. Collectively, you represent a broad range of community, business, and civic leaders, religious, philanthropic, and labor leaders, and of course our esteemed elected leadership, and our friends, of course, in the media who are here to share today's special event with our entire community. So to use a baseball analogy or vernacular, let's throw the first pitch and get today's event underway. I am proud to invite to the stage the chairman and CEO of our Kansas City Royals, Mr. John Sherman, and his very special guest, the Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Mr. Rob Manfred. Commissioner, on behalf of all of us here today, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome back to Kansas City, because clearly you're no stranger to our great city. We look forward to hearing about the state of the game and about your perspective on a whole host of engaging topics. I've got a few questions that I'm going to send your way, and a few questions that we've gotten from some of our friends here in the audience that we will also pass along. At this point in time, I'd like to turn the podium over to a guy who is a tremendous friend of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. He and his wife, of course, are as philanthropic as anyone in our community. And when he bought the Kansas City Royals, I was honored that he called me to tell me he was buying the Kansas City Royals. And let me tell you, I have buyer's remorse when I buy an automobile. And he had just spent a bunch of money to bring a baseball team, and we're so thrilled that he and his ownership group has this team here in Kansas City with intentions to make sure that it stays a fabric of the Kansas City community for many, many years to come. Please welcome Mr. John Sherman. Whatever's comfortable.
Thank you, Bob, and welcome everybody. This is a great group of people here gathered today. As Bob mentioned, leaders from all facets of our community and elected leaders from throughout the region. Thank you for being here today. Probably too many to mention, but I would be remiss if I did not mention the senior member, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. Rev, thank you for being here today. Thanks for all that you do, and as well as all of the elected leaders that are here today. You know, I'm going to, this process that we're in the middle of right now, evaluating, it's imperative that we do this right now to find a new home, a new stadium, a new ballpark, but as importantly, a new location where we can bring vibrancy and energy around the ballpark and do great things for this city. Bob, I don't have any buyer's remorse. Although I've had people saying, are you still enjoying it? But we bought this team because we love this city. But what we're here to, we're not going to talk today about how we're going to finance it, or, I mean, happy to answer questions along those lines, but we're not, the focus of today is not about how we're going to finance it or where it's going to be, but really we're going to try to look a little bit more big picture and listen to the commissioner. In fact, along those lines, Rob, thank you for being here today. It's been very generous. He arrived here this morning We had a employee event, which I thought was great. It's a rare opportunity for our associates to spend some time with the commissioner. We also had a lunch with the front office and some people in leadership, which is a rare opportunity for our people to hear straight from the commissioner kind of the issues in baseball and how he is thinking about them. I'd also be remiss, our skipper here, Matt Cutraro, is here. I noticed a couple of ball players, Matt over here, although we call him Q. I haven't called you Matt in a long time. But and Brady Singer and Vinny is here as well. The reason Vinny's working on getting his shoulder better, and Brady just pitched a couple of nights ago, which, by the way, took a no-hitter into the 7th inning. We ended up making it more interesting. Seattle came back and took the lead in that game, but then we had a tremendous ending with really 4 tremendous at-bats in the 9th inning, including what I'm calling our signature walk-off, and that's the safety squeeze in the bottom of the 9th, or the 10th, either way. But anyway, with that, I want to turn this back to Bob. Thanks again for being here. I look forward to the program.
Yeah. John, thank you so much. And let me tell you, it is a tremendous honor for me to be sitting on this stage with these 2 leaders of our game, and for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum to be represented. Vinny, if you need a little help with the shoulder, man, I can get you connected. Satchel Paige had a guy in North Dakota who created some kind of concoction made out of rattlesnake venom and gunpowder. And Satchel would rub it on his shoulder, and his shoulder came back to life. Now, they say it stunk, something all terrible, but if you need a hookup, just call me. I'll get you set up. And we're looking forward to you getting healthy and getting back in that lineup, and the success of our young Royal team we are really, really excited about. Commissioner, you've been no stranger to this museum, and under your leadership, I can say this, and I say it sincerely, Negro Leagues Baseball has risen in its recognition tremendously because you have led Major League Baseball's embracing of what this history represented both on and off the field. We all owe a great deal of gratitude to you for that leadership. I remember walking you and your wife through the museum 2015 when we were about to win a World Series, and walking you guys through this museum. And ever since that time, we've had this wonderful relationship. I go back to December of 2020, which I think was a landmark moment in black baseball history when Major League Baseball announced that it was going to recognize the Negro Leagues for what we already knew it to be, a major league, and then roll into the annals of Major League Baseball history the statistics of the Negro Leagues. That was groundbreaking on so many levels. It does not happen without this man's leadership, because there were others who could have done what he did, but didn't. And that's something that we are inherently proud of. I fast forward to this year, where the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and Major League Baseball partnered on the first ever animated series on the Negro Leagues called Undeniable. And this is groundbreaking as well, because as we look at meaningful ways to engage young people around a history that has not been made in over 6 decades, these kinds of platforms are very, very important. The inclusion of the Negro Leagues in the video game MLB The Show 23, which has been absolutely game-changing. Millions of young people and young adults are falling in love with the Negro Leagues through this gaming platform. We're so thrilled about this and the 5-year partnership. What was even more funnier, though, was I see my friend Vahe trying to teach Vahe and I how to play the game. Was hilarious, but we'll save that story for another day. And then, of course, I just got back from Birmingham. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move into this. But Major League Baseball's announcement to do a salute to the Negro Leagues at a place that is so meaningful in Negro Leagues history, Rickwood Field. These things are all seminal moments in black baseball history. And when we take the field on June 20th of next year, when the San Francisco Giants, or I should say the San Francisco Sea Lions, and the St. Louis Cardinals, a.k.a. the St. Louis Stars, take that field. And if we are fortunate enough to have Willie Mays still be with us, to walk on that field some 75-plus years from the time that he was a 17-year-old center fielder there for the Birmingham Black Barons, you cannot create these kinds of moments in any other sport. That is baseball. And these moments are absolutely aligned with your leadership, and we thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. You know, it's interesting. You talk about decisions that you make going along. It flows two directions always. You know, and I'll give you a small example. The day you took Colleen and I around the museum, really impressed, and one of the things that I learned during that trip to the museum was that Hank Aaron's nickname when he played in the Negro Leagues was Pork Chop. I'd never heard that. I mean, I'd known Henry for years, and so Henry happened to be with us in the suite that night because we were giving the Hank Aaron Award. And, you know, he was kind of a fixture at the World Series in my early years. It was really a treat. And he always sat like on a high stool, you know, looking out at the field. So I slid in the stool next to him and I said, "Hey, Pork Chop." He looked at me. And, you know, it's one of those funny things where, you know, we'd always been perfectly cordial, whatever, but it was kind of the spark of a real friendship with Henry. And, you know, I think that's true of all of the undertakings that you referred to. You know, Rick Wood's a great example. I mean, you talk about a small world. Actually, good friends with John Steislinger's brother, one of the limited partners in the Royals, and he happens to live in Birmingham. And, you know, a big part of the beginning of our relationship was Lee encouraging me to do something with baseball in Birmingham. And, you know, I think sometimes when you do what is the right thing to do, you get paybacks in other direction. I think those are two great examples of it.
Yeah, well, this is going to be, again, a seminal moment. And every time I step on places like that at Rickwood Field or the restored Hinchcliffe Stadium now in Paterson, New Jersey, you feel the ghost, the spirits of those legendary Negro Leaguers. And I think as a steward of the story, that is certainly not lost on you. It gives you chills to know that you're standing on the same ground.
Yeah, I think we have some, I mean, I think we have some Rickwood envy in New Jersey. I think we probably could have gone either place and had a great event. And, you know, the fact that we picked Rickwood because it was the oldest, really. And you know, it is in a part of the country that I think really important to the history of the Negro Leagues. And, you know, the last piece of it, I think people know, you know, Willie Mays from that area, and you know, given his advanced age, we thought it was an opportunity to pay special tribute. You know, God willing, he'll be with us to one of the greatest players of all time, and you know, make sure that people remember what a great player he was.
Yes. Yeah. Now that's important to us, and again, we thank you. We thank you for that, and I look forward, God willing, I look forward to being there and being a part of that historic event. Want to get into a little bit of questions about your path into baseball. I don't know if you ever get to talk about that as much because you spend all your time dealing with the issues and things in and around the game, but I want to know how you got involved with the game professionally.
You know, I was practicing law in Washington. I was an associate in a law firm, and we had represented Anheuser-Busch for a number of years. I'd done a lot of work at the breweries and whatnot, and at the time, the Cardinals were owned by Anheuser-Busch. Still, the AV still owned the Cardinals, and you know, baseball had had some problems with the collusion cases, and our firm was retained to kind of come in and clean those cases up. And I got assigned to the to the client, kind of like associates in big law firms do. They call you in, they tell you this is what you're doing tomorrow. I mean, it was a great opportunity. I did some salary arbitration work early on. I worked on the collusion settlement, and then got assigned to work on the negotiations in 1990. Kind of stayed with the client, went through the strike in 1994, and then in what some people thought was a pretty questionable career move, decided to leave the firm, come in-house as the labor person at MLB. I really thought I was going to do one contract for them. That was kind of what I was thinking. I was a partner in a law firm, and they didn't make me resign my partnership. I figured I'd go back to the firm, and I don't know, I ended up doing 3 deals, and Commissioner Seelig was good enough to kind of expand my portfolio beyond labor as time went on. And, I can honestly say this is true. I never thought about being the commissioner of baseball till Bud decided to retire and people started to talk about it. It was really, I didn't think it was ever going to happen for me, but I will say this, people ask you about it all the time. It is truly the greatest job in the world. I got 30 great owners. Like every group of 30, you have your days with some and days with others, but that's life. But the most important part of it is being around what I regard to be the greatest game in the world and the greatest group of players. I've made a special effort in the last couple of years to try to be around our players in informal settings more, and the more you get to know them, the more impressive you find them to be.
No, our game is in great hands with these young ball players.
I couldn't second more what the commissioner said about, the opportunity to participate in this game at this level. I mean, you talked about not wanting to be commissioner. It'd be kind of an unreasonable expectation to be a little kid and want to own the Kansas City Royals. But the opportunity to participate in this game, particularly at this level, is an incredible privilege, and to get to do it here in Kansas City in our hometown really makes it very, very special.
I'll say something. I have to say this at some point today, so we might as well get it out of the way. You remember particular days, because they make an impression on you. And I have to preface this by saying, David Glass was a great owner. He was really important to me in my career. I actually was honored to speak at his memorial service, and I was concerned about what was going to happen with the Royals. And when John called me and told me he was going to do this, I was really surprised. He was kind of ensconced in Cleveland, for those of you who don't recall. But, the city here really lucky to have had 2 great ownership groups in a row. And
3, actually.
Yeah, that's right. And
our founder.
You know what? I didn't mention Union just because I didn't know them. But the 2 I've known, you couldn't really ask for better. The community's really been blessed.
Appreciate that.
Well, we have a tremendous legacy of great baseball in this great city known as Kansas City. And we know it all started with the great Kansas City Monarchs and now our Kansas City Royals, and we're excited about the future of this. Curious, are there any particular moments in your tenure as commissioner that stand out for you maybe more than some of the others? I know the labor negotiations and all that stuff can be very tedious and it's important, but are there anything that you just say, this was pretty doggone cool?
I will say, and that I've said this other places outside of Kansas City, one of the most memorable moments for me was giving David Glass the World Series trophy in 2015. It was my first time. And I was so fond of Mr. Glass that it was a really special moment. In a funny way, the end of the World Series in 2020 was a really important moment. It was one of those, we had the owners, and I really, it is important to say it that way, had decided that they were essentially gonna, and they knew it going in, lose $3 billion as a group because they thought it was important to play baseball that year. And the fact that we got through the World Series, literally by the skin of our teeth. We had a lot of COVID going on right at the end of that World Series. The relief of having made it through there. And then the third one I point to was, I'm not sure which one was better, London in 2019 or London in 2023, but I think that seeing 58,000 people in a converted soccer stadium, watching baseball, going crazy, buying merchandise faster than we could put it on the shelves, made a real impression on me in terms of the upside potential of our game, international growth being one part of it. When you go to a city like London, great city, and you realize that the buzz in that city is about Major League Baseball, that's a pretty special thing.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. And to see the international growth of our game, and even as I watched the WBC this year and obviously was pulling for the U.S. to win it, I have to admit I wasn't disappointed that Japan won it because the Negro Leagues go to Japan in 1927 and brought that brand of baseball that the Japanese had not seen before. And so it gives me these teaching moments through our sport. And to me, that's the beauty. Our game is an international game in large part because of the Negro Leagues, and a lot of people did not know that. But watch the animated series, Undeniable, and you'll find out more about the international impact of the Negro Leagues.
By the way, let me say a word about that. We have a great partnership with NPB. They're, Japanese professional baseball. I mean, they really are truly great partners. I will say this about the WBC. When they win and you lose, there's no mistaking that you lose. Okay? I'm just telling you. They kind of let you know about it.
How about the Ohtani-Trout matchup?
Unbelievable.
You couldn't script it any
You couldn't have
better.
scripted anything more dramatic than that, and what that did for our game to have all those eyeballs watching baseball in March was.
It was maybe the best buy that Fox ever made. We didn't have we thought we were going to put the WBC games on the MLB network, which is what we had done the previous time, and Fox came to us in late. And, they said they wanted to buy the rights. And, we were thinking, well, it's a great property for the network and trying to drive distribution of the network. And then they kind of dangled the idea that they'd put games on network television. It was too good to pass up for us. And, we did get that storybook ending. It was really
Yeah, no, you couldn't script it any better. Ohtani versus Trout was reminiscent of Josh Gibson against Satchel Paige. It was that same kind of drama. And so that's another special moment. The rule changes. A lot of great rule changes. Now I got a little bit of bone of contention with you on this thing because
you and everybody else.
this pitch clock, which I absolutely love, but it's killing my TV time. I go in the booth, man, and the inning is over before I can get a couple of words in. But it has sped up this game, and you made these sweeping rule changes. And baseball, the thing we love about baseball is its tradition.
Yeah.
And the thing that maybe has hurt our sport a little bit is its tradition. And you bucked tradition on this thing.
Yeah, well, this was a long-term effort that, a lot of people were involved in. I will say, I think the most important thing to say is this. The rule changes were driven by fundamental research about what our fans wanted from the game. We're big believers in, we're not smart enough to sit in a room and think up, what's the right decision or wrong decision. We always try to do quantitative research, and we played 8,000 games with these rules in the minor leagues so that we felt pretty confident as to, we were going to deliver what our fans wanted. I think the second thing, when you ask professional athletes, the guys will tell you, I mean, you change your routine and your rhythm. That's a hard thing to ask somebody to do. And, if you think about it, our players did it almost seamlessly. I mean, there were, I'm sure it was difficult for them, but from the perspective of the fans, it was almost seamless. And, we really owe them on that front. And not only did they adjust quickly, our fans liked the rule changes. We weren't surprised about that. But, then the fans care most about what the players think. And players were overwhelmingly either silent or positive about the rule changes. And when fans hear that the players are positive, it creates this little virtuous cycle that, everybody's reinforcing everybody, and we were the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, well, it's exciting for us here in Kansas City as Manager Q is in here, and our young Royals are stealing bases and doing these kinds of things. And, this game hadn't changed fundamentally in years. If you can pitch it and you can catch it, you're typically going to be fairly successful.
I'll tell you, the stolen base though is kind of a sleeper. One of the things we learned in the research process was that athleticism in general and the running game, stolen bases, were way more important to our fans than we intuited. And that's why you do research. And I do think that when you drop back and think about the research, it's about athleticism at the end of the day, and they are plays where players show us their athleticism.
Well, we saw one the other night when Bobby Witt circled the bases in about 14 seconds. I told somebody, I said, cool Papa Bell is somewhere in that great somewhere standing up applauding that inside the park home run.
We saw Bobby out at the stadium when we were doing it, and I said something to him about the speed running the bases. This is the great thing. God bless me with some speed. You gotta love that. I mean, it's just, you have to love that, right?
There's a lot of speed on display that night.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Talk about attendance.
Yeah. Look, we are enjoying the strongest attendance year that we have seen in well over a decade. It actually, we talked about this and it didn't get so much traction. It actually started last September. We had the strongest September that we'd had in a decade. We thought a lot of that was due to the new playoff format, more teams in contention, more cities where people want to go in September. People realized we were going to play a more balanced schedule. So what does that mean? We were heavily weighted with play inside a division. And one of the things we were hearing from fans is, if you're in New York, Baltimore's in town again. Why is Baltimore in town again? It's just too frequent. And more importantly than dealing with the negative, it's the positive of you get to see great players from around the league more regularly, which helps make your product a more national product. So we had the balanced schedule, I think, helped us. WBC was a kickstart. We talked about that already. Absolutely gave us a push going into the season. And I said this at the employee meeting. Usually opening day, if people are interested in players and what's going on. Like the AP reporter will call up and want to do an interview. That's about it. We had all three morning shows. Wanted to talk about baseball. I did morning shows, all of the three network morning shows on baseball. There was a lot of buzz surrounding the game. I think a lot of it did have to do with the rule changes, but it was these other issues as well. We're running up about 9% this year. We are within shouting distance. We are hoping we get to 70 million fans. Knock on wood, we'll get there. We haven't been there in a long, long time. And it would be a real accomplishment for the game. Real accomplishment for the game.
I think the balanced schedule, I think it's more positive than we think. We talk about the other rule changes, certainly the pitch clock, the pace of play, but the balanced schedule. I mean, we had a great weekend here in Kansas City against the Cardinals on Saturday night. Biggest crowd since opening day. The atmosphere was electric. Also was a good game. And I noticed, in Miami over the weekend,
Right.
Miami Yankees drew 100,000 people over 3 games. And
Right.
those are just those big weekend games where we're driving interest. I think that's having a real positive impact on our business.
I think we had 9 weekends in a row where we drew over 1.5 million, which is phenomenal for us. We also had recently a weekend day where we averaged over 38,000 fans in the ballpark, which is really something.
Now that is awesome, and I tell you, we talk about this. Our game's about entertainment, and we're entertaining at a level which we absolutely enjoy in a self-serving standpoint for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Having the Los Angeles Dodgers come in here, these teams like that, the fan base is so supportive, and they came to the museum in huge numbers. Yeah. So we're all excited about that.
There's one other thing that I didn't say something about, and it is really important. I think our clubs at the individual level have done a great job about reprogramming their stadiums in order particularly to attract younger people, and I think it's a big part of the attendance boom. Our more modern facilities where the programming is more flexible, you can create kind of stand-up areas, more bar atmospheres. It allows you to sell tickets in a more flexible way than you might in our traditional and older stadiums. A really important part, not only of getting more people to the ballpark, but getting more young people. I think baseball gets a really misleading rap about being older. The fact of the matter is our demographics on our digital products are much, much younger than our broadcast audience, and our demographics of who's in the ballpark are much younger than our broadcast audience. I said it at lunch today, the fact of the matter is your broadcast audience is old because only old people watch TV. I'm one of them, but,
It's interesting to see how these changes are impacting our game on so many varied levels, and it's exciting because we talk about it here at the museum, is continuing to create relevancy. How do we create relevancy, whether it's history like we talk about here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, or how we keep continually reinventing our game. It's a great game, but we keep finding meaningful ways to make our game better and more entertaining. Yeah, and to me that harkens back to the spirit of the Negro Leagues, particularly from an entertainment standpoint, and that's exciting. Can you talk a little bit about the long-term health, relevancy, and viability of baseball as an entertainment option and business driver?
Yeah, look, I am somewhere between really and wildly optimistic about the upside of baseball. I think it begins with the fundamental quality of our game, that I do believe it's the greatest game in the world. And I think it is a part of, people talk about, popularity, this sport popularity, that sport, this, all great. The fact of the matter is there's one national pastime, right? And to me, what that phrase means is that our game occupies a special place in American culture that gives you a bedrock from which you can always grow, number one. Number two, I think that we realized right at the beginning, right after I was elected, that the key to fandom is youth participation. And we learned when we looked at that space that baseball had slipped a little bit. We had actually gotten to the point where we were not the most participated sport in the 12 and under group. So what do we do about that? We, and I mean us, the clubs, we went out and we invested really heavily in youth participation, particularly in underserved communities. The facility that you see right out here is a great example of a club making an investment. But we've done it at the league level, and all of the clubs have done it in their own communities. We're now once again the most participated sport in the 12 and under group. That formative participation builds fans for the future. And, we have some great partners in that space. Little League Baseball is a phenomenal organization. We're going to be there this weekend in Williamsport playing a major league game alongside the Little League World Series. We laugh. We went to Cuba a few years ago to play a game, and I invited Steve Keener, the president of Little League Baseball, to go along with us. And, my goal was to try to make it. President Obama happened to be there. We're trying to make a deal so that Cuban players could go back and forth and play without having to defect. I failed miserably. Steve Keener now has, I think, 50 Little Leagues set up in Cuba. He's a lot more effective than I am, apparently. But I think that, domestically, I think the key to our growth, and it's something that we're really focused on, is, we want our product to be more national. We think it's important that we deliver from a media perspective games on the platforms that fans want to watch them so that they can watch who they want to watch, when they want to watch. Real goal of ours from a media perspective, money's always important. Our single biggest goal, if you summarize it in one word, is reach. We want the game in the hands of more people going forward, and we think that's the key to our growth. And then last, we talked about international already. I think that there's a real opportunity for us there.
What's ahead? What's on your list of goals and strategies as we look toward the future?
I think the biggest issue that we're wrestling with right now is the demise of the cable bundle. I think the good news from fans' perspective, when Bally's Arsons went into bankruptcy, I said publicly, fans will not miss a game, and they've walked away from a couple of clubs, one in San Diego, one in Arizona. In fact, every single game was available within the traditional cable bundle. It was also available through a digital product in market, again, increasing our reach in both of those cities and has been throughout the year. I think that while it is unsettling to have long-term partners face financial difficulty and to deal with change like the erosion of the cable bundle, I truly believe that it is an opportunity for us to expand our reach and get to more fans. I'll give you one little example. San Diego, we have higher viewership on the cable side than we had before Bally's walked away, and we have nearly 18,000 digital subscribers. So who are those 18,000 people? Those are 18,000 people who were sitting around in San Diego, they were outside the cable bundle, they were looking for a chance to watch the Padres, and when we gave it to them, even in the middle of the season, they signed up and took it. To me, that's the upside for baseball.
Yeah. Well, and you talked a little bit about the overwhelming success that we saw in London. What's in store for continuing to grow the game internationally?
Well, I think, internationally is a broad phrase. So our approach on international is that we have very different markets. We have some really developed markets like Japan where, we make money now. We got great broadcast contracts. You have a player like Ohtani. You can really drive those markets. So in developed markets, our approach is to get into a relationship with the professional leagues where we have a thriving domestic product in the foreign country, but we have some premier players that come here and drive both of our businesses. I mean, Ohtani's a great example of that, but an example where we have work to do is Mexico. A lot of professional play in Mexico. We don't get enough players out of Mexico. And we're working with those professional leagues who have been very reluctant to let players go. We think more Mexican players playing in the big leagues would help us grow internationally. So that's kind of the developed baseball culture end of the scale. The other end of the scale where we're spending a ton of time is a country like India. We have a program where, again, participation being the key to fandom. Baseball's being taught as part of their school curriculum, which is a great opportunity for us. And you take a very different approach there. We're really not looking to make money. It's more about teaching kids the game, start to get some participation, and then you provide digital content over the top to show people what the game is at its very, very highest level. So, there's all sorts of different approaches, but I do think that, there's funny opportunities that present themselves. When you travel in Europe right now, the amount of licensed product, baseball licensed product that you see is truly shocking. Most of the people don't have one darn idea about what the logo stands for, but we got one heck of a merchandise business going in Europe, which is a good thing. It's another foothold into a developed economy where you can eventually grow the game.
It's all exciting. It really is. And just a little bit, I know that diversity in our sport is something that is a top priority of yours as we sit here on the front steps, essentially, of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. We're very proud of our partnership with Major League Baseball and the Players Association, utilizing the history of our game to encourage young African-American kids to dream about playing this game. And as we're on the cusp of building a new 30,000 square foot Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and if anybody got an extra $25 million out there, send it my way. And that way I can pay Congressman Cleaver the $27 he said I owe him for the $1 a year rent that we never paid the commissioner. So, but
in case you didn't know it, Bob's in the middle of a capital campaign.
yes, shameless plug, but you got to get these in every time you get an opportunity. But diversity has become a high priority of yours. And why is that important to our growth of our game?
Well, I think about it in three pieces. I think that we have invested heavily, particularly in underserved areas, in order to increase particularly African American participation at the big league level. Obviously, we have a lot of diversity, huge Latin component of players. We have been a little underrepresented from the perspective of African American players. Why? We've invested, we've seen return on that investment. Our last 5 years, our first round draft has been about 20% African American. Almost all those players came out of some Major League Baseball program. We're about 6% at the big leagues now. We feel like we're making progress. Why do we want to make that progress? We want to make that progress because we don't believe you can attract a diverse fan base if you don't have a diverse product on the field. And then the third piece of it is attracting a diverse fan base if you don't have a diverse front office in terms of trying to attract those fans to the ballpark. Really hard to pull that off. And so we see those three pieces all working together. And we really do see it as a business imperative. It is doing the right thing, but we also think that there's an absolutely sound business justification for every investment that we've made in this area, and that those investments will eventually grow the game. I don't know, John?
I think about it. I think certainly from a business perspective, having a more diverse workforce is good business. But I think about it also when I think about where we are here in the inner city, and I think about the Urban Youth Academy and really using baseball to get young people to come here, right? And then to have the opportunity to help them think differently about their own future, right? When we all know this, we're trying to change predictable outcomes, right? Where you end up should not be dictated by where you start. And if you can find ways to inspire young people that maybe don't have the same types of opportunities some of us do, magic happens. And I think we all know the more people that have opportunity and get the opportunity to achieve their potential, we all benefit. So that's kind of how I think about the kind of the on-the-ground work here at the Urban Youth Academy, but certainly we're doing the same work with our workforce, and it is becoming more diverse.
You know, I'll tell you, my favorite ones is, you know, we took over, you know, Vero Beach was the long-time spring training site for the Dodgers, where Jackie Robinson went to spring training. So Dodgers moved to Arizona, and you know, it was unclear what was going to happen at Vero Beach for a while. Peter O'Malley, the former owner, had a lease, and he didn't. What he was doing with it was not clear. So we decided to take it over. We went and toured it, and the history. There's a game room there that is essentially untouched from when Jackie Robinson went to spring training. And, you know, the idea that somehow this wasn't going to be preserved, we were like, we got to figure out something to do here. So our idea was we now call it the Jackie Robinson Training Center. We developed an elite program, okay, for African American kids. You come to that facility. The first year was supposed to be a 2-week program. We wanted to identify 200 elite African American players. We had a hard time filling the 200 slots the first year, even though we had all former major league players and or major league managers or coaches as the coaching staff. I mean, it was the greatest accumulation of talent teaching baseball, you know, probably anywhere. So the first year, we had a hard time identifying 200 real prospects. This year we ran 5 2-week sessions. We were oversubscribed with players, okay? We had to turn kids away. Even more heartening from my perspective, we actually had major league players, former major league players, that we had to tell them we didn't have room for them to come and volunteer for 2 weeks in the hot Florida sun to teach kids. And you know, when you ask about the future of the game, to me, that story may be more important than any of the business things.
Yeah. Well, I've been blessed to go down to Vero on several occasions to speak to some of the young people talking about the history of the Negro Leagues. And again, when you walk on that campus, I mean, to know that Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb and Junior Gilliam, they were all there because Ricky built it so that he could have a safe haven for his black players because he couldn't turn them loose in Florida, you know, and he built this beautiful campus, and to think that it could have just been lost to the ruins of time.
Right. I mean, Bob alludes to really another really important piece of history. There's actually a hotel on the campus which Ricky built because he didn't want people off campus in segregated hotels in Florida. And, you know, it was one of the things that when we started this elite program that was appealing to us, right? We had that hotel facility available as part of it.
Yeah, it's pretty special. Let's talk a little bit about Kansas City. And I know there are a number of examples of where new ballparks have brought growth to an area, new development, and significant increase in business activity. Can you share from your perspective how new ballparks have made an impact on their local communities during your decades working in our game?
Let me give you 2 examples. I think one has gotten more publicity probably than the other. The first one's Washington. You know, I lived in the district, worked in the district for 15 years. The Navy Yards where National Stadium sits, at the time I lived there, you wouldn't go there. I mean, you just, no one went there. If you go now, right, you got the ballpark, all this development that has, you know, high-class housing, mixed-use development that's gone on around it. Actually, part of a move of the quote-unquote center or prime part of the District of Columbia down towards the Navy Yards, right? Away from the DuPont Circle, 18th and M, which was kind of the traditional, down into this area. And, you know, it is the power of baseball, right? 81 games changed what that community looks like, all for the better, all for the better. I think the second one, and everybody talks about this one, the Battery and Truist Park, absolutely unbelievable. I went there for the groundbreaking. I thought Terry McGurk, the control person of the Braves, had lost his mind when he, I know how big a piece of land a ballpark sits on. I had some clue. I'm looking at this piece of land and thinking, what the heck is he thinking about here? It's just such a huge tract of land. Well, I'll tell you, what I was looking at that day is phase 1 of the Battery. They are now in phase 3. They literally have built a city where there was none. It has become kind of one of the prime entertainment centers in the Atlanta metropolitan area where there was literally nothing. The best restaurants in Atlanta, a number of them have opened restaurants in the Battery because it's so popular. And I'll tell you, if you saw the Battery after the last game of the World Series, I mean, it's unbelievable how many people. Yeah. So it is. Look, again, I never talk about other sports but the sports are different, and one of the things that makes a huge difference, 81 home games has the capacity to drive traffic like no other entertainment product.
Yeah. You had an opportunity to tour both potential sites for a new downtown stadium for our Royals. What do you think a new ballpark district could mean for a middle market community like Kansas City?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, the fact that in Kansas City there are 2 sites, just of unbelievably high quality that are available for the building of a ballpark is a tremendous opportunity for this community. Forget for the Royals, for the community. I mean, both of these sites are outstanding sites for a new ballpark. And I think both of them present the opportunity for entertainment district development around the ballpark. I think in our economic system, because of some of the changes that I alluded to before, new facilities provide a ball club with an opportunity, revenue generation opportunities that simply don't exist in older footprints. I mean, at some point, great baseball park here. Having said that, it is an older ballpark that does not have the kind of premier revenue generating opportunities that you get in a new facility. For a market of this size, those opportunities are crucial in today's game in order to put the ball club in a position to be competitive over the long haul. If you're in a really big media market and, you're getting big media dollars, it's less crucial. In markets like this, you need that live gate revenue opportunity to be competitive.
As you know, when John made the move to buy the team and put together the ownership group, 100% of his group has deep, meaningful ties to Kansas City. How important do you believe a local ownership group is in this mix?
You cannot overstate the significance of local ties in the community. It affects those relationships, those ties in the community affect the way that politicians react, the political system reacts to a club and the things that it may need to accomplish. The deep roots in the community create opportunities that someone who's not there all the time, not rooted in the community, maybe somebody owned the Royals, not from Kansas City, they might not identify the 2 sites that John and his group have identified. It just permeates everything that a club does. And, I'm not saying it has to be local ownership every single place, because we have places that have been successful without it. I just think it's a lot easier and a lot more likely to be successful with a real local group.
Yeah. Well, as we are growing near on time, I do want to take a couple of questions that were sent in by members of our audience, and I do think we have enough time to get through those before we close out what I think has been a tremendous session here today. Commissioner, how can baseball appeal to a younger group, and what can we do to make it more appealing to come to the ballpark? And I think you talked a little bit about that earlier, but just for that question that was posed by the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I would point to three things. I think, and some of which we've talked about. I think it starts at the bottom with participation. You get kids to play, research really strong, they're way more likely to be fans. Number two, it's the ballpark experience. It was what we were just talking about, the modern program, I think is the best word, in a ballpark that's attractive to young families, young people, that are vital to the future of our game. And then the last one that I like to think about, technology is really important, particularly with younger people. There's a huge difference, I said this before, in the demographics of the people that use our digital products as opposed to our traditional broadcast audience. We've been a leader on the technology front. We were the first ever over-the-top delivery, MLB.TV. But I think making technology relevant in the ballpark, it continues to be really important. I'll give you a great example of it. The Futures game, before the All-Star game, we actually used the automated strike zone system, the challenge version of it, and not quite ready for prime time. We're still working on it, but it was really interesting. I was standing out in front of the suites, and there were people on both sides out in the suites, and like the existence of the automated system, the renderings that go up on the board in terms of showing you why the replay came out the way it did. People are just really interested in it, and I think we need to continue to find ways to allow younger people to mix the engagement with the game with technology improvements.
And John, the tough question, of course, comes to you.
The what does?
The tough question.
I feel kind of like Ed McMahon. I'm saying you're Johnny Carson.
I guess that makes me Johnny.
That ages all of us.
Exactly. Why doesn't John Sherman and the ownership group just pay for a new stadium themselves?
Well, it's a fair question. And I would tell you that I'd probably start to answer that with talking about the partnership, the 52-year partnership that we've had in this community that we have today with Jackson County, the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and the state of Missouri. I feel pretty strongly about the fact that, we want partners in this business. And, it's also the ballpark. We need a modern ballpark, and I don't think it's in the right place anymore for where we are today. But that stadium has served us well. And it's a result of, a big part has been that partnership between, we're the fourth oldest building in baseball. We've continued to put money back into it. I mean, we can't change it structurally, but certainly the fan-facing. It is interesting when you're talking about the young people. Sarah can probably tell me this. When I look at the ballpark, even when we have a small crowd, we have craft and draft. We have two kind of, rivals in right field and craft. We really have two, I would call them, gathering spots, and they're packed even when you go to Denver and there's people everywhere, or I know even when I was in Cleveland, we did the district where, so that's all about modernizing it. But so the quality of the partnership. I also think that, we're going to, we acquired this team knowing we had an old building, knowing it'd be 60 years old and this would be the most important decision that we would make while we have the privilege of stewarding this franchise. And we want to partner on that. We want to, whether we're looking for a 25, 30, 40-year lease, at the end of that, that's going to be somebody else's problem, not mine. And I really want the Royals to be tied to this community in a long-term way, like it has been to this point. We happen to inherit while we're at this critical juncture, and we're taking that very, very seriously. But I would just answer that by saying we think it should be a partnership. We feel like we'll deliver great public benefit and economic impact, and we expect the community to measure that and hold us accountable for delivering that. But that's why our feeling is it needs to be a public-private partnership.
Well, I think it's an exciting opportunity for our city. It's an exciting opportunity for the east side of this city with the economic development that can be created and the meaningful job opportunities that can come along with this. And again, that's moving beyond the self-serving aspect of getting a group of people closer to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which is always at the forefront of my mind. But there are some other benefits alongside just Negro Leagues Museum.
Number in your capital.
And before we close, and I know, Commissioner, you talked about this, and John is going to actually officially close this out. I personally want to say thank you again for being here, being a part of this session, and again for your continued support of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. John, I will turn it over for you.
Well, thank you, Bob, and
to close us out.
And Commissioner, thank you for being here today, but also thank you for your leadership. And you talked a little bit about the pandemic. We had acquired the Royals in late 2019. Barely breaking ground on spring training, and the pandemic hit. And I was naive enough to think we wouldn't open on April 1st, we'll open on April 9th, right? But it became certainly much more challenging than that. And so, when you observe a group of people and, dealing with adversity like that, so I had that up close and personal opportunity to see the commissioner operate under great pressure. And so that I really appreciate, not just that, but we got through that. More importantly today, thank you for making this game. Thank you for having the courage to put in processes that make this game more entertaining, that make it more interesting to younger and diverse audiences as well. And we need to continue to make sure we innovate along those lines. I think, Kansas City is at this is not just about baseball, but, our city, our region is at a critical juncture. And I say that in a really positive way. I think a couple of years ago, we were down in Arizona. We had an event in Surprise at spring training, and I was asking the group to kind of dream with me a little bit. And I thought, we're building a new airport. We're competing to host the World Cup. Today we have a new airport. The World Cup's coming. We just hosted the NFL draft. We got a women's soccer stadium coming out of the ground on the riverfront, which is the only one of its kind in the country. And the Chiefs and the Royals, we're talking about doing some really special things for this community. So I think this is the type of a momentum, and I think a set of catalytic events that could sustain a region in a positive way for decades, and it's really unusual. And we want to make sure that we're a big part of that, and that's what this is all about. I would just go back to, I said it before, we bought this team because we love this city, and we want to do something special with it. So again, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and have a good rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.